Good morning, everyone. Welcome to admin. Annie, roll call.
Online, we have Brenna Davis, Cheryl Hartman, Christina Dovard, Alicia Buckhold, Griffin Smith, Katie Fairbanks, Kim Meyer, M. Pat, Melissa Fisher, Nicholas Santos, Randy Arnold. In 206, we have Commissioners Hero Slotnick and Strohmeyer. We have Allison France, Vinnie Publish, Chris Lounsbury, why can I not say that? Ann Hughes, Maddie Scott, Annie Kathy. And Carrie Powers joined us online also.
Great. Thank you. Any public comments on items not on the agenda? Blustery out there. Consent agenda, it's kind of extensive.
Reading it right now.
There's anything that needs to be pulled out or discussed?
Chris,
separately?
Yes.
is Allied Waste still a thing?
Oh, good catch.
I think that is the,
Is that like the parent
I
company?
think that's the parent like name that belongs to Republic Services, but.
I didn't know that.
Services locally.
Anybody remember BFI?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
I would move we say yes on the consent agenda. Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, Nixon Edis for our first action item.
Good morning, Commissioners.
morning.
Today we are requesting that you approve the qualifying resolution for the Grant Creek South of West Broadway project. As a reminder, this is part of the Grant Creek realignment project that the city is undertaking in the Mullen Build area, and Trails Bond funding for this project will go towards the trail component of the proposed project, which will include a shared use path that will extend from West Broadway and have a future connection into the Mullenbelt area via the Flynn network. Yeah, I'm here for any questions. If not, you have a qualifying resolution and a motion in front of you.
Thank you.
No questions. I move that we approve the resolution.
Yeah, I'll second that. Just add, this is a great project. Super excited that we can be, as the county, be part of it.
And this is like the keystone piece to make the actual like larger project happen.
It's a great thing. I mean, the reduction of
It
the
is.
floodplain, the restoration of the creek, paving way for development, it's just got win-win all over it.
Okay, any further discussion or questions for Nick? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Maddie Scott, Food Policy Board.
Hi. So this is a request that we have a few terms to fill. 3 members decided not to renew their membership. So we have 2 terms that expired on December 31st, 2024, and 1 that is a partial term open through the December 31st, 2026. The alternate Blake Lineweaver submitted a letter of interest to move to active member. So request board to appoint him to an active member seat for a new term beginning today through December 31st, 2027. We had 2 applicants, Anastasia
Don't even try. It's okay.
Orkwinzowski and Mallory Pop. So you guys met with them, and both of them seemed very interested in being on the board, and it's very go-getter.
So, even been involved with board a bunch.
Yes.
Blake's done a tremendous job, super smart guy, contributes, comes all the time. Really think perfect for him to move up. And Stasha is what Stasia is known by, has been a valuable part of this board when she wasn't on the board. She runs the guard and board dining services and is involved with procurement and dining services. He knows these issues really well. So I would move that Blake move up and Stasha take a spot.
Okay.
And I would thank Mallory a lot. She's super young, and also it said she may not be around for a while.
Okay.
So there we go.
Thank you. So who's doing the partial term?
We will reopen applications for partial, and with Blake stepping up, that would open an alternate seat as well.
Thank you. Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
All right, next one.
Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Zoning Board of Adjustments, there's gonna be some moving around, so it's been a while, that's why this hasn't been done yet. It's 3 of the members decided to resign. There's gonna be some readjusting in the future of going to a city and a county board. So those city seats, some of them decided to step down now and wait until the later if they decide to renew. But for now, we have Annie Mefford and Jennifer Schultz. That Jennifer is the current alternate and submitted a letter of interest to move to active. And then Andy for a reappointment to a new 2-year term to fill those seats to get quorum.
Do we have a sense, has Andy been up
Yeah, he's been on for like a couple years.
and he's been active?
Yes.
Great.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah.
Exactly what you just said.
Okay. Awesome.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you, Andy and Jennifer. In correspondence. Legislative update?
Yeah, so
In session.
I say the legislature is in session still. We're at day 68. Not that we're
Yeah.
counting. So a couple of bills just for you guys today to talk a little bit about. So I'll start with the first one. We'll talk about SB 205. SB 205 would revise the laws related to voter approval of property tax levies and bonds. And we have seen this bill before. This one is from Mr. Hertz, Senator Hertz. And this is the one that basically would require, well, it's a bit of an interesting combination this year. So 60% is in there. But what it would do is actually require there to be at least 50% of the people who vote, who are eligible to vote, voting in an election to begin with. If you have less than 50% of the folks voting in the election, that's where we go to the needing 60% of the people to have voted in favor for it. So if you get at least 50% voter turnout, then it's kind of a standard majority. And then if you don't get at least 50% of the voter turnout that's eligible to vote, then you go to this requirement for a supermajority of 60% of the people, in essence, being in favor of the bill.
I'm sure this was embedded in just what you said, so I'm sorry for
No worries.
a dumb question. Are we talking 50% of registered voters who are like on the rolls? Or are we talking about 50% of the adult humans in Missoula?
Yeah, it's not 50% of the adult humans. It is 50% of the electors that are eligible. So just to be clear, generally speaking, although it can vary from election to election, that would basically mean only when there's a presidential election would you cross the 50% threshold. And so the rest of the time we would most likely be in that scenario of needing at least a 60% supermajority. So when you were attempting to pass either a bond or a levy.
So basically voted on levies or bonds would really only be a realistic possibility every 4 years.
It would be really challenging in any of those other years, to get to that 60%. There are some that have passed the 60% threshold. It's just unusual for that to be the case. And so
that's unusual for any election to be greater than 60%, unless, of course, you're voting on the resort community tax in Whitefish.
Yes, a good example actually where those generally pass the first year kind of by a narrower majority, but then every time they come up for reauthorization, they're usually in the 80-90 percentile range because they do have a direct correlation with reducing property taxes, and folks appreciate that. So we are sending a letter, we did send an opposition message on that particular bill based primarily on the fact that, again, people choose whether to participate in the electoral system, and folks who are going out for bonds and levies, not just counties, don't really have any ability to control who shows up for an election or how they vote. But in every other case, it is a majority of the people who show up, who elect folks to office, who pass bonds and levies, and to say that somehow a majority of the people who choose to participate is not adequate means that really the foundational piece of elections kind of starts to fall apart, and we start saying, are we gonna not accept then the vote that put a city councilman in place or a superintendent of schools or whoever else just because they didn't get that? Because even in statewide races, we don't get a 50% turnout.
There's a good chance that Mr. Hertz himself was elected in an election where 50% turnout wasn't reached.
Yeah. So that was the first one. Paired with that is Mr. Hertz's bill, SB 204, which is the one that would
Your
require,
grandfather voted and paid.
not quite, would require even existing voter-approved levies to be reauthorized every 10 years. So it basically provides a sunset for existing voter-approved levies and then requires any that are passed by the voters to come up again every 10 years. Which makes funding and planning for services really difficult because, for example, in Missoula County, Missoula Aging Services, the library, the mental health mill levy, all of those are voter approved and in essence would now be subject to this every 10 years, somebody needing to run a campaign in essence to reauthorize what we kind of think of as the ability to permanently fund some really critical services in Missoula County. It would also create real challenges for things like urban renewal districts. So when we talk about TIF and TED financing, because that means the funding available in those funds would vary every 10 years based on what voters reapproved or reauthorized during the creation of a district, in which case it'd be really hard for us to then issue bonds to construct projects because we won't know what the funding is that can actually pay for
A less than 10-year bond.
Yeah, so those two bills together would be really challenging. So we've sent letters of opposition on both of those two bills. We were requested by Senator Beard to see if we could have somebody in the room during that testimony. So Jen Hensley, our lobbyist, is going to be in the room. She has our talking points. Again, we've seen these the last several legislative sessions, so we have some good data that she's equipped with to go.
Have these changed since the last?
They change minorly session to session, but the general premise behind them and the impacts they would have has
Okay.
changed.
And Jen is so great at speaking to all these issues. And when speaking about the last bill, if it would be possible for her to lean in a little bit to the tremendous successes we've seen in our TEDs in terms of economic development. And then when we bond for things like the removal of the repository, what we see is development follow. And in terms of growth, and I know Mr. Hertz is very much pro-growth and pro-economic development, this is a very successful tool and not worth neutering in the name of property taxes. And in fact, if his real goal here is to lower property taxes, there are other ways to do it. This is not the way to do it.
Of course, Mr. Hertz is also very anti-TED, so we can definitely make that point to the committee, but I don't believe the sponsor wants.
I totally 100% agree, but I'm imagining there will be other people on the committee who are very excited about economic development, even in a place like Missoula.
Yes. Yeah. The next one I wanted to chat about was the next one to talk about really quickly is SB 209, which would impact conservation easements. And so it changes conservation easements to be limited in the length that they can run with the land. You can currently have a limit, just to be clear, you can currently have a limit on how long your conservation easement runs. This would require there to be a limit on all conservation easements of 40 years, which would mean that you would not really be able to conserve open space in the way that Missoula County has historically done it through conservation easements. You would have to look at preserving open space more through fee title, where in essence we were purchasing land,
Right.
which the county has done on occasion, but there are far less county projects where we purchase land versus a conservation.
Who's this one gonna?
His name is Tony Tezak. I'm not familiar with Senator
Is Jen
Tezak.
going to speak on this one?
I don't know that we will have Jen speak on this one. I think we will send a message of opposition, but I think we will largely look to the conservation community to be the ones against this. I will say its hearing is happening today, and there was a long list of opponents. Great amount of
I'll just
opposition.
speak for myself, but an objection here that doesn't have a lot to do with conservation, but has everything to do with private property rights and a family's ability to plan for legacy and future generations. And I don't feel like there's a place for the state government to get involved in those types of really intimate decisions around people and land and multi-generational decisions. And I feel like they should not put their nose in that.
Yeah, that was one of the strong arguments that was being made, was this idea that, there were quite a few ranchers and others who were there who have conservation easements who were basically saying like, we did this tool because we want this to stay as a ranch.
It's voluntary.
It's voluntary.
We don't want it. We don't want it to
voluntary.
be broken up. And there was a gentleman, the last piece of testimony that I heard on it before I needed to drop off listening to this particular committee, was mentioning the fact that he and his wife are first generation ranchers, but the only reason they could purchase the ranch that they had was because it had a conservation easement on it. So the value was less than it would be if it had been, you know, a large scale tract of land that could be developed.
Very, very commonly, because there's not a ton of money in farming and ranching, a family will decide to sell a conservation easement, which in a sense is sort of like selling the land, but not. You get almost all the money, not quite, so they can stay on the land and keep it in production and make it available to their children. Their other option typically is to sell, which either leads to subdivision and development or for somebody to end up with kind of a private estate with some pet horses.
And where's the sponsor from?
No slam on horses.
And this is Montana.
I mean, and I'm just going to guess this is all part of the angry reaction to American Prairie and what they've done in central Montana with purchasing easements.
Yeah. Those are kind of the main bills that are up this week. It seems to largely be focused, continuing on taxation and that. We do have a few other bills coming up this week. Just for a reminder for folks in judiciary, including the concept of creating a new level of court called the Chancellery Court, or as we like to call it, the Chancery Court.
Who would be going to Chancellery?
So this court would hear 3 specific types of cases. It would
Elected officials.
it would,
Probably would be elected officials.
it would hear
Snarky remarks, well over caffeinated.
a lot of things that the commission would be subject to the Chancery Court. So land use is one of those, and of course you do a lot of land use
Would there be new
cases.
laws or just a separate court?
Nope, it's just a completely separate court, separate from district court and separate from the Supreme Court.
I'm sorry, what's the etymology? I'm like really struggling with the word.
Chancery.
Yeah.
I have no idea where
Come
the,
on, Vinny.
I think isn't it an attempt to be vaguely British and then it sounds a little more fancy?
Yes.
but the
In
etymology.
ancient times, like, well, not that ancient, but in England, right, there were 2 different kinds of courts. There were courts of law and courts of equity. The equitable courts were sometimes called courts of chancery.
Equitable,
And
we're not
so
supposed to say that anymore.
a different kind of equitable,
Okay.
sort of.
Could lose
Sort
federal
of not
funding. We're in a
different, but
public
sort
setting.
of different enough that some people feel that it's different. In any event, equitable courts dealt with some components of what the Chancellery Court would probably deal with. But my understanding of the idea of the bill is that there are things that the legislature or some legislators believe take too long to go through district court, or they don't like the rulings that they get out of district court. And so they want a certain court to handle mostly constitutional challenges, but also these land use decisions. And then there's like one other category.
So it handles land use, business, so
Business.
disputes between businesses and constitutional issues. Etymology wise,
Constitutional
it's
issues.
Latin, but the current one is 12th century British
Okay.
for how it's gotten converted from Latin into English.
So what's the fiscal note associated with?
The fiscal note is actually very low. It's about $2 million for the first year and then about 1.6-ish, if I remember correctly, for the years coming after that it would cost the state to have 3 of them across the state of Montana, one in Helena, one in Billings, and one in Missoula, and that would hear these 3 classes of cases.
Does the governor appoint the judges or do they?
These judges would not be elected judges as district court and Supreme Court judges are. They would be appointed by the governor to 6-year terms.
Constitutional issues too.
I imagine there will be challenges should this pass. I don't know. I don't want to speak to what they will be, but I imagine there will
So
be.
would this
challenges.
basically just leave district court to dealing with criminal things?
No, they'd still have every other civil.
Yeah.
Like,
but so
if it's not so like family
Injury,
law?
injury cases and then an awful lot of family law.
Yeah.
Like family law is probably the reason why a lot of courts seem bogged down. There are just an awful lot of those kinds of cases. And
Sure,
they slow up the
sure.
process.
But if the governor gets to appoint judges who hear constitutional issues, it would certainly make some of the culture war things that he's taking on easier to.
Well, so they are still subject to the Supreme Court
Yeah.
for appeal. They would function like district court in that they would be the first court that these cases were heard in.
What other state has such a
They
thing?
are not but they are not district courts, and they also serve as an appellate of themselves because if
Appellate of themselves.
if one judge decides something in Missoula and you disagree with it, you can
Go to
appeal
the-
to the full
Oh.
three.
Which is actually
Judge
like sort of a typical way of doing an intermediary court system. But, and it's only cases could still originate in district court because that's kind of up to litigants, right? Like I, as the lawyer, get to decide where to file things. But what would happen is if the case was inside of the jurisdiction of this new court system, it could be removed to that new court system and either party can cause it to be removed there, which is how, so like if you have a claim that is mixed state claims and federal claims, one of the parties can move it to federal court, usually the defendant, because the plaintiff has already made a choice about where they want to be. And so long as it meets federal jurisdictional requirements. And so that is how I see this happening, is like you would probably see a lot of plaintiffs filing like, you know, constitutional issues get filed by like interest groups, right? So they would probably file it either in Lewis and Clark or wherever. And then that it would get bumped to Chancery Court, and which court, how they do the ROTA is very interesting. Like it's like who gets which case, you know? So like right now, a lot of those cases get decided in the first judicial district because that's where the state is and that's where a lot of the competency is. I don't know. I don't know if their intention is to get those cases moved to like Billings and to Missoula to be decided by a judge who lives here, or maybe lives here. Again, there's like a lot of really weird logistical things about this that are hard to understand, but it doesn't seem to be outside of the scope of the legislature's power.
Are there interest groups that have come out strongly in favor of this? I'm thinking maybe groups who are concerned that land use decisions haven't gone their way.
No.
We'll see tomorrow when the hearing is, who shows
I'm
up.
wondering if the state organization of realtors is really excited about this.
This is an idea that came out of the Judicial Review Commission thing. And so I think like many of those bills so far in the judiciary committees, I would not expect to see very many proponents of the court system. There may also not be very many opponents. It's very hard to figure out how this will work based on the bill. But
And you can choose with the Chancery Court, like just what type, I mean, like you said that this is just land use, constitution, business.
Those are the only three areas over which they have.
And they just decide that's what they wanted to do, but other Chancery courts can do.
Yeah, so for example, in Delaware, I'll just pick on Maryland, which is where a lot of businesses incorporate. The Chancery Court primarily deals with business issues, and that is their area of specialty, and they deal with corporate law. That's what they do.
And the problem that's attempted to being solved here is that there's a backlog of cases at district court, maybe because there's so much family law that these decisions aren't made swiftly.
that is a purported reason.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think there is also a view that they would like constitutional issues decided outside of district courts.
Right. And the thing is, like the Chancery Court that Chris was describing in the East Coast, that's probably why the business component is contained in the jurisdictional issues here. I didn't get the sense from the earlier committee hearings that they care whether business issues are decided by this court or not. It's just like, that's the model. And so that's what it looks like. And then what they did is kind of bootstrap the other issues that they want to be decided separately from this.
And if constitutional issues are there, and we've seen that that's really important to our governor and our current legislature, and the judges are appointed rather than elected, they have a better shot at getting the decisions thereafter.
They might think that. I mean, truthfully, I would not make serious guesses about that before you start to see a judge do the work of the judge. The cases that have resulted in unconstitutional bills, like one of the frustrations I think you see in the legislature from lawyer groups right now, is that these will be unconstitutional either way. It doesn't matter who the district court judge is. They're like obviously unconstitutional. They're designed like there's, we may see an abortion bill or something like that in this session, and the citizens just literally voted for this. It's going to be pretty clear to any lawyer looking at it that you can't make that kind of a legislative decision at this time. They don't necessarily care.
Though that may be the motivation behind this, even if their goal isn't realized.
I think it's part of it. I also think that, what we're seeing, right, is like a lot of frustration between the legislative branch and the judicial branch, and it's kind of exploding in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah.
And the motivation also might be to irritate the judiciary. I don't know. I could not say.
Yeah, that's a good description of what's happening.
Yeah.
And the last bill I will bring up, and I apologize, I don't have the bill number on this, but I will find it really quickly, is there is also a new bill that is coming out to regulate marijuana dispensaries and purchases for marijuana
read about this one.
dispensaries. Yeah, as I say, based off creating a new
Existing.
required ID card
Oh,
in
that's-
order to purchase both medical and recreational.
This isn't
marijuana.
if you want to start a new shop, you have to be an existing shop and you can buy a new place.
So that was already in place and actually has been extended
To
to the last
2027.
legislative session and is being proposed to be
That's
extended
the
again
one.
in this legislative.
So
session.
this one is an ID card if you want to buy recreational weed.
Correct. Yeah, it would be a new state issued ID that would be required. So you wouldn't, like right now you have to show your driver's license.
What's wrong with your
Yeah.
driver's license?
That, yeah. So
Yeah, I'm like lost.
I'm not sure what the
You already
motivation
have
behind
to
that,
show, if you already have to show
but a government issued
Montana
ID. Yep.
driver, is this
Yeah.
just to make it more difficult?
I'm not sure what the purpose is behind that bill, but I imagine we will get some feedback because there's been quite a bit of feedback around cannabis in general every time it comes up as a topic during the legislative session.
So people from other states have to show this card?
In the way the bill is right now, yes, you would have to purchase this card because it's just like getting a state ID, you would have to go and fill out the forms and then pay the state a fee in order to be issued this card. So yes,
So if you're here as a tourist and you want to buy some legal cannabis, you'd have to go pay for a specific Montana weed buying ID
correct.
for your 3-day vacation here. So you
And
can
if you're
get your
that
gummies.
dedicated.
If you're that dedicated, because rafting doesn't work without a gummy. The boat won't inflate, it just sits there.
So that's what we have for today.
Slatnik
Want
is
more on
nominated.
On Thursday. Sure. but-
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Are we commenting on that last one?
We are not commenting on that one right now because it doesn't change the way funding flows related to this or impose a requirement on us, but I anticipate, given the way that it's structured, there's the reason we're watching it is there's the potential that requirement for the ID card could be moved to local government as opposed to being a state function, which we
Well,
see with
then-
other things, and in which case,
Yeah.
then
We
they
don't need any more
potentially
work.
come to you and take a position on it.
And where are we with the chancery court stuff?
We are watching it because right now, it does not have an impact on local government because it does not require the counties to, in essence, provide this. It's the state is providing the court and the judge and all of those things. So, but we are watching it because we provide the backup
That's
for
a-
district court.
I
So,
mean, we would, I guess.
Or not the backup, the backbone for
Are we
district.
going to have to provide the space and staff?
Not as it's currently written.
Great.
So,
Okay.
yeah. If that changes, then we will have a position because we do have a space issue in the courthouse if we start talking about adding more judges. So,
Okay. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks.